You and I live in a world shaped by events we never witnessed. Nearly 80 years ago, the most destructive war in human history ended. But its echoes remain alive in the voices of those who lived through it. Their stories are not just about survival. They are about the impossible choices people faced, the courage they summoned, and the resilience that carried them forward. These stories demand more than just listening. They ask us to reflect on what it means to be human. Imagine Betty Webb, an 18-year-old British girl recruited to work at the top-secret code-breaking hub of Bletchley Park. She wasn't baking sausage rolls like many women were expected to do. Instead, she was paraphrasing intercepted enemy messages to disguise how the Allies cracked the German Enigma codes. The work was crucial, yet it came with a lifetime of silence. Betty couldn't tell her parents what she was doing, couldn't share the weight of the responsibility she carried. Imagine being that young and knowing your work could alter the course of the war. Would you have taken on that burden? Victor Gregg, a British rifleman, found himself in a different kind of nightmare. Captured by the Germans, he survived the Allied bombing of Dresden, an attack that killed thousands of civilians. He recalls seeing women and children burned alive, their screams echoing in his mind for decades. "We were supposed to be the good guys," he says, his voice trembling with guilt. It makes you wonder, in the chaos of war, how do we define good and evil? How do we justify the choices we make when survival is at stake? Maria Roklina was just 16 when she became a Soviet combat medic during the siege of Stalingrad.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
She ferried wounded soldiers across the freezing Dnieper River, paddling with her bare hands when her oar broke. The cold etched itself into her bones, a pain she still feels decades later. She speaks of warming circles where soldiers huddle together to survive the brutal winters. In the midst of unimaginable suffering, humanity survived in small acts of kindness. Would you have the strength to find warmth in such a cold, unforgiving world? Then there's Yevsey Rudinsky, a Soviet navigator who flew dive bombers over Kursk. "If you feel nothing, you're not human," he said. He felt fear only after landing, when he saw the bullet holes in his plane and the bodies of his fallen comrades. His story reminds us that resilience is not the absence of fear, but the ability to keep moving forward despite it. How many times in your life have you suppressed emotions to survive? Should you? Could you? These voices challenge us to confront deep questions about our own lives. How would you react if thrust into a world of ethical dilemmas, where every decision carries life or method consequences? Would you rise to the occasion or falter under the weight of it all? Igor and Valentina Morstein's story is one of quiet heroism. As children during the siege of Leningrad, they found an orphaned baby crying beside its deceased mother. They began searching door to door for other orphaned children, saving lives amidst the starvation and despair. Decades later, one of the children they rescued tracked Igor down to thank him. What drives a starving child to protect others? What does that teach us about the human spirit? Janine Burke's father left her at a stranger's doorstep to save her life. For 2 years she hid from the Nazis, peeking through cracks in the outhouse where she was sent during raids. When the war ended, she never saw the woman who saved her again. Now in her 80s, Janine still cries, saying, "I never had a chance to say thank you." These small, quiet acts of love and defiance remind us of the extraordinary power of selflessness. Would you have the courage to let go of someone you love if it meant saving them? Hans Erdmann Schönbeck, a German officer, narrowly survived the horrors of Stalingrad. Disillusioned with the war, he considered assassinating Adolf Hitler but refrained, knowing it would cost his family their lives. Instead, he resisted silently, sabotaging missions when he could. Schönbeck's story forces us to ask, when is silence an act of defiance? When is it an act of survival? Frederick Turner, a Holocaust survivor, secretly sketched scenes of life in Nazi concentration camps. Drawing became his lifeline, a way to hold on to his humanity amidst unimaginable cruelty. Decades later, his art stands as a testament to resilience, a reminder of the human capacity to create even in the darkest times. Could you find beauty in a world of ash and despair? As we listen to these stories, we are reminded that courage doesn't always look like charging into battle. Sometimes it's a mother letting her child go to save them, a child risking their life for a stranger, or a man quietly defying a tyrant. What would you sacrifice to protect someone else? What would you do to hold on to your humanity? These voices from the past don't just tell us what happened. They challenge us to reflect on who we are and who we want to be. They remind us that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, love, courage, and humanity endure. Let their stories inspire you to find strength in your own life, to act with compassion, and to hold on to hope, no matter how dark the world may seem. Let's now dive deeper into the aftermath of these stories, the scars they carried, the wisdom they gained, and the lessons they left for us. War doesn't end when the last bullet is fired. It lingers in the memories of those who endured it, shaping their lives and ultimately ours. Take Harry T. Stewart, Jr., one of the Tuskegee Airmen, an elite group of African-American fighter pilots who broke barriers during a time of racial segregation. At just 21 years old, Harry shot down 3 enemy aircraft while escorting bombers over Europe. Imagine the skill, precision, and sheer courage it took to fly into enemy skies. But when the war ended, his wings were clipped. Not by enemy fire, but by the racism of his own country. Denied jobs as a commercial pilot, Harry turned his focus to engineering and built a successful career, yet he never stopped advocating for recognition of the Tuskegee Airmen. "I just want them to be remembered as good Americans," he said. "How often do we let systemic barriers limit our potential? What would it take to rise above them, as Harry did?" Now picture Eugene Polinsky, a navigator on clandestine missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. His crew dropped supplies and agents to resistance fighters, flying so low that their planes snagged tree branches. They were warned, "If you're shot down, you'll be executed as a spy." Eugene didn't know the full importance of his missions until decades later, when a Belgian resistance leader told him, "You helped liberate Antwerp." Reflect on that. Spending your youth risking your life without knowing the impact of your actions until years later. Could you trust that your sacrifices would matter in the long run? Then there's Wilhelm Simonsen, a German pilot who witnessed the horrors of war firsthand. At 19, he flew over Warsaw, guiding German forces during the invasion of Poland. The smell of rotting bodies in the rubble haunted him. "I said to myself, "I'll never drop a bomb on a human being," he recalled, and he kept that promise. Wilhelm's story forces us to ask, how do we reconcile the roles we play in systems we don't control? When should we draw the line, even at great personal risk? Frederick Turner's story is one of unimaginable resilience. Surviving 4 concentration camps, he returned to Prague after the war to find his entire family gone. In the face of such loss, he chose to create, to paint, to draw, to leave a record of what he endured. His art, fiery and textured, is both a testament and a challenge. Never forget, but also never stop creating, even when the world around you is falling apart. Could you find the strength to create something beautiful out of ashes? And then there's Victor Gregg, the British rifleman who wrestled with the trauma of Dresden for decades. He recently found forgiveness in an unexpected place, speaking to a German woman who had survived the bombing. In her acceptance, Victor found peace. "Somehow at last I felt forgiven," he said. This moment reminds us of the transformative power of reconciliation. What grudges or guilt are you holding on to? What would it take to let them go? Finally, consider Shizuyo Takeuchi, who was just 13 when firebombs destroyed Tokyo. Her home was reduced to cinders, her family's belongings turned to ash. She recalls running through streets filled with charred bodies, her emotions numbed by the horror. Years later, Shizuo became a storyteller, dedicating her life to bearing witness to the atrocities she survived. Her work is a call to action. Remember the past so that we may build a better future. What can we take from these voices? First, resilience doesn't mean forgetting pain. It means carrying it with purpose. Each of these individuals faced unimaginable suffering, yet they found ways to move forward. Can you? Second, courage often comes in quiet acts, helping a stranger, defying injustice, or simply choosing to survive. How can you show courage in your daily life? Third, we are all part of a greater narrative. The decisions we make ripple outward, affecting people we may never meet. What legacy do you want to leave behind? Their stories are more than history. They are mirrors that reflect our own potential for strength, love, and humanity. Nearly 80 years later, their voices remind us that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, the human spirit can endure and hope can prevail. So ask yourself, what will you do with the time you've been given? What story will you leave for the generations to come? Think of Valentin Shorin, a boy who lived through the siege of Leningrad. He vividly recalls the moment his mother, too weak to care for him, handed him over to his aunt with tears streaming down her face. "Go, Valya, go," she said. "I'll come for you when I get better." She never came. The siege claimed over 1 million lives, including hers. Valentin's life became a series of orphanages, but he survived, driven by an enduring sense of his mother's love. Even now, he says, it still hurts to this day. His story asks us to reflect on the ways love can be both a source of pain and a reason to carry on. How do we honor those who sacrificed everything for us? Do we live lives that would make their sacrifices meaningful? Then there's Hans Bergmann Schönbach, who narrowly escaped the horrors of Stalingrad, only to question his own role in the Nazi regime. Assigned to Hitler's entourage, he found himself standing face to face with a dictator. For a fleeting moment, He considered using the pistol at his side to end it all, but he didn't. "I thought, you've been given another chance at life, don't waste it," he recalls. After the war, Schoenbeck dedicated his life to rebuilding, vowing never to let such destruction happen again. He became a pacifist, advocating for peace and reconciliation. His story is a powerful reminder that even those who are complicit in systems of oppression can change, choosing to rebuild rather than destroy. What systems are we complicit in today, and how can we begin to dismantle them? Frederick Terna survived the Holocaust, but his survival came with a responsibility to bear witness to what he endured. "We didn't know then that I was actually making historical documents," he says of his sketches from the camps. Those drawings, preserved and rediscovered decades later, serve as a haunting reminder of the atrocities committed. Frederick's story is a call to action for all of us. History has a way of repeating itself when we fail to remember. What stories are we preserving today? Are we listening to the voices around us, or are we letting them fade into silence? Janine Burke's story also underscores this responsibility. Hidden in a stranger's home as a child, she survived while so many others did not. She often wonders what became of the woman who saved her. "I never had a chance to say thank you," she says, tears in her eyes. Her gratitude is a testament to the profound impact one person can have. These stories remind us that history isn't just written by generals and leaders, it's shaped by ordinary people. You and I may never lead armies or draft treaties, but we can create ripples of change in the lives of those around us. What acts of kindness or courage will define your legacy? Reconciliation and healing. Victor Gregg found himself haunted by the memories of Dresden, the charred bodies, the screams of the dying. For decades, he struggled to reconcile his role in the war with the destruction he witnessed. But his journey toward healing took a surprising turn when he met a German woman who had survived the bombing. In her forgiveness, he found a sense of peace he had sought for so long. Reconciliation doesn't erase the past, but it can help us move forward. It's a lesson we can all carry. What conflicts in your life need resolution? What would it take for you to forgive or to ask for forgiveness? Shizuyo Takeuchi, a survivor of the Tokyo fire bombings, turned her trauma into a mission. She became a storyteller, ensuring that the horrors she witnessed would not be forgotten. "I felt scared because I lost my emotions for a time," she says. But by sharing her story, she reclaimed her humanity. Her work reminds us that storytelling is not just about preserving history, it's about healing. When we share our pain, we transform it into something that connects us rather than isolates us. Who in your life needs to hear your story? And